Some of you recall the video that I posted a few days ago when we posted the Nigerian High Commissioner to South Africa and saying he is out of touch with reality about what is happening in Africa. And he said that there is no colonialism to fight.
Because the whole of Africa has been decolonized. South Africa is independent, Namibia is independent, and so is the whole African continent, with the exception of probably some aggression against Western Sahara. So is it not time that EFF takes a posture that is more inclusive of development concepts rather than imaginary fighting colonialists that do not exist in any way?
In Africa at this moment, and EFF was imaginary. Well, there is a former African Union ambassador in the US based in Washington, D.C. She was fired by African Union for her being vocal about these issues. And that shows you how grave these issues are to Africa in particular, but also how our leaders in Africa are conniving with the colonizer to make sure that they keep Africans in neocolonialism and form of slavery from the Western powers. But let us listen to what she has to say about the coup in Niger and what is happening, and why she thinks that France still has done a lot of coups in Africa. And this, what is happening in Niger, is not in itself a coup, but it's actually a realignment that is happening in Africa. Let us take a listen to her. She was on the morning show, a show that is on a TV channel that is in Nigeria. Let us take a listen to this.
Let me come back to you. I like the point you made about ideological realignment in Niger. Well, ECOWAS doesn't seem to think so. So ECOWAS defense chiefs are meeting today and tomorrow in Accra, Ghana, to decide on the mode of military intervention in Niger, which is one of the options that the ECOWAS heads of state and governments had put on the table. On Monday, however, the African Union Peace and Security Committee met, and that body, was divided about military intervention in Niger. They couldn't form a consensus on that issue. So you have two different positions. AU not deciding on military intervention. ECOWAS defense chiefs meeting today, tomorrow in Accra, Ghana. Do you think that ECOWAS putting military intervention on the table, announcing a standby force, has put a good option on the table?
I don't think it's a good option. And I would want to ask the same people who are sitting at the table having those discussions about having military intervention in Niger. Let me remind you that there are other coups that we are not talking about, that we should be talking about. By France forcing Niger to send all its natural resources to France, that's a coup. By France having its own military in Niger and forcing Nigerians that you can only be trained by France, that is a coup. By forcing Niger to deposit 50% of its reserves with France, that is a coup. The question I have for those who are sitting on the table, during those ECOWAS meetings, during those AU peace and security meetings, what have you done about those coups? Take those 3 coups, multiply by 14, because that's what's happening in the 14 former French colonies. Those are deadly coups that have been taking place for decades. And you, ECOWAS, have done nothing about those coups. I need them to also answer and give us remedy as to how they are going to handle those coups. Make no mistake about it. Those are coups against the African citizens in those countries. And while they discuss what they would like to do with Niger, I would also want them to table those coups and come up with a solution as to what needs to be done. Because behind those coups that I just described from France, there are millions of children who are dying from starvation. There are millions of children who are going to bed with an empty stomach. There are millions of African youth who are unemployed. There are millions of women who are dying while giving birth to another life. I need them to put that on the table as well. If their interests are truly about the Africans, let's look at the global view of the issue. Let's have a bird's eye view of the issue and have a frank and fair and honest discussion about what is really going on in Africa. I do know that I don't think the carnage that's going on in Africa is what ECOWAS is all about. Leadership is about the people. It's about creating a better life for the people. But if you're going to allow one who has committed egregious crimes in Africa continues to have coups, those are coups. Let's call a spade a spade. You can't give France a pass. So also let us know what you intend to do about those ongoing economic and political coups that are being imposed on those 14 French countries, former French colonies by France. So to just talk about what's happening in Niger alone in isolation and not go to the root causes of the genesis of why what's happening is happening simply does not make any sense. And I would hope military intervention in Niger is not an option. That simply is not something we should do as Africans. There are better ways of dealing with our issues. Our elders must come together. Our elders must have a frank conversation, and let's look at what is ultimately best for the people, not only the people in Niger, but in all former French colonies and ultimately in all African countries, because this moment is calling for unity, meaningful unity of purpose among the African leaders to simply say, guys, this can no longer continue. It simply cannot continue. The people have spoken, and I hope our leadership would listen.
You recall the video that I posted a few weeks back when the professor Benyera from UNISA said that ECOWAS was not going to do anything about what is happening in Niger because they are divided. But also, he also pointed out what Dr. Arikana Chihombori is saying, that this is an awakening that is happening in West Africa, and it is an awakening that is happening in Africa, that Africa should ward off this colonization that is still going on in form of resources being plundered out of Africa and into other parts of the world. And I'm glad that even in our own country, our very own president has stopped the extraction of lithium in its raw form outside the country. They've said, if you want your lithium, you want to take lithium from Zimbabwe, you must be able to build a plant and create employment in Zimbabwe. You are not going to extract raw lithium outside of our country. So I think that personally gives Africa an edge to say we need to negotiate things in our own terms and not continue to have this exploitation. But what do you make of what the Nigerian ambassador is saying, and what you are also saying, that he is out of touch with reality? And what we are seeing the leaders in the African continent doing, and the leaders in ECOWAS doing, dealing with these coups and uprisings that we are seeing across Africa. What do you make of this? And I would love to hear your thoughts on the state of Africa and the state of affairs. And are we going to see Africa finding a better partner, or a partner that is going to trade with them in good faith, or in a way that is going to leave Africa in a better position? Tell me what you think in the comment section about the war in Niger, and the comments by Dr. Arikana Chihombori.